How do I even start? That is a serious question. You see, YouTube's a game that I have to play. I have to intrigue you into my videos so you keep watching. I get your view and retention throughout this video. It increases my standing amongst all the other creators covering this same machine in their own way. But the problem is, I, like most humans, have a conscience. So tricking you into watching just feels dirty. So whilst I have to cover this printer, I can't lie to you up front and say this is going to be a fun journey. If you're historically a fan of Phrozen machines, or maybe you've already bought one of these, this is your trigger warning. I genuinely never want to upset anyone, so honestly, if you're looking to validate the purchase of one of these, maybe watch a different channel. I know this will upset you because I'm a fan of Phrozen. I'm a massive fan of Phrozen, but doing this video upsets me. If you're prepared to fairly hear me out, and I mean listen all the way to the conclusion at the end for justification, then let's continue. But if you proceed, I'd really like to avoid seeing nasty comments thrown my way, please, because I warned you up front. And please remember, these are just my opinions. It's fine to disagree, politely. So hi, I'm Ross, and this is Fohammer Videos. Let's start off a bit more upbeat. If you already know Phrozen, you probably have some awareness of one of two standout milestones from their brand. One is they made huge innovation waves in advancing the technology forward by releasing the original Sonic Mini 8K, which at the time, and coupled with their 8K resin, was capable of detail beyond anything we'd previously seen. And two is that they are typically the more robust and reliable brand in terms of general hardware performance. So as soon as I popped this out of the box, only to find another much sexier box, it was clear that the presentation of this new machine is far beyond what the other brands were doing. But is this good presentation leading to an excellent product inside, or is this just pretense? Let's get into it. Here we have another 14K printer that's not 14K, it's not even 12K. If you want more detail on that, please check out my 12K printers are irrelevant video. I made that video so I didn't have to keep explaining it in every video, as my frequent viewers are bored of that. I'll talk more on print quality as we go through, but let's start outside the printer. Unboxing is straightforward and everything was nicely laid out and presented well. This actually has some panache, whereas most other printers are still just put in basic cardboard boxes with little more objective than bunging everything inside. And I do like the effort that Phrozen pour into their delivery. First impressions matter, and here it makes this printer feel more like a real retail product and less of a janky hobby tool. The printer is nice, it's very attractive, it's got a full metal body except for the front fascia holding the LCD control screen, which is plastic. The lid mechanism is lifted directly from that on the Mega 8KS. This stays in any place you put it, which is handy, but you'll also need to consider that despite the online size specifications of the machine itself, this is only when it's closed. You'll actually need at least 64 centimeters height and 54 centimeters depth in order to fully open the lid. The USB port is on the front, which I love, and the power cable and switch are on the back. Personally, I would have liked to see a secondary switch on the front because giving this a blind reach around fumble to turn it off when needed is as uncomfortable as you might imagine. On the back chassis you have a removable plate to attach an extractor hose, and on the other side it has the same ports that the Mega 8K has to connect up the resin pump accessory. I've never found these useful, and whilst Phrozen have sent me one, it's so much easier and faster to pour resin in and out manually from this small vat that I'm just not bothered about it at all. I can only see the value on larger printers. Inside the machine, you've got the same style laser etch plate that Phrozen brought out with their mighty 8K, one that other brands have since copied because the grip is amazing, but it's not too strong that you can't easily pry off models unless you're overexposing your base layers. The handle of the plate has a nice grip, which is a small thing that other brands of this generation have failed to provide. This does still attach to the Z-arm with a large bolt, and yeah, that's fine, but the community has clearly responded more positively to printers which use compression latches for securing. And whilst leveling is adjustable on this machine using the same 4-screw mechanism as previous Phrozen printers, there should be no need to do this because it comes pre-leveled from the factory. And like every other brand, the website states auto leveling, but it's not auto leveling. Just like the poorly received Anycubic M5S with auto leveling, this is no more than auto zeroing. The screen has springs behind it and it will detect pressure. If the bed is slightly off kilter, it'll still print, but whichever side is lower will give you slightly compressed layers. Now, so long as my base layers adhere and print, I couldn't care less, to be honest, because I always put my models on supports. But there are some people who print some things direct from the plate expecting dimensional accuracy, even though the base layers will have to be overcured and bloated anyway, but whatever. If people want to do that, it's fine, I just don't get why. Looking down the Z-arm, you have dual linear rails and a smooth motion ball screw secured by a bearing at both ends of the frame. This is nice and it immediately screams reliability. And then we get to the vat. This is fine, it's a vat. I just wish it was deeper so I could hold more resin in it, but it'll do, I can't really complain. I am, however, glad to see that they use PFA film, not ACF, and God, I hope ACF is dead. Now, if you want it, you can still buy it from plenty of places online, but it blurs details on print. So as I've said before, what is the point of having such a high-res printer when the release film obscures detail? Anyway, this doesn't have it, so that's a moot point. Yay for PFA! Below the vat, we have a screen which I'm super glad to see comes with an integrated tempered glass screen protector, something that other brands should include, but they don't. Now, Phrozen have slightly and smartly played down the 14K angle by just calling this the Revo online. But on the printer, the box, and every photo, 14K is plastered everywhere. But as I said, it's not really 14K because here you only have a resolution of 13,320 by 5,120 pixels, which is 14K on the x-axis, but the y-axis is the same as last generation's 12K screen. And by the way, they weren't 12K either. Go watch that other video if you haven't seen it. If you have seen it, you'll know what I mean when I say we'll class this printer as one which has an AVC of 24 microns, and the print quality, which I can show from a simple exposure test, is also nigh on identical to most of the 14K and even all last gen 12K printers, which, if you're new to printing, isn't significantly better than the last generation's 8K printers, if it is at all. So, since we seem to have peaked on print quality, we're going to need some serious feature enhancements and ease of use benefits with this one in order to justify it, especially when you consider the price. Now we're getting to the follow-on from my opening statement, so please bear with me, this is all the good stuff up front. The build area here is also identical to what it was on the Mighty 8K and the upgraded Mighty 12K printers, which is 235 by 126mm, which is also the same as every other current 14K printer because they all have the same screen. The build height here is 235mm. So here we are again, and I'm going to warn you again, if you don't want to see bad stuff, click away. And that shouldn't be something that a YouTuber recommends people to do because I want views. So if you don't want to be upset, look away now. With the printing lifestyle improvement features of this machine that it needs in order to be validated above the fact that the resolution isn't much better than anything else on the market or last gen or the year before, this is the first one. And I guess I'm hoping this is the swaying point for you that justifies this printer as your next purchase. If, say, you're a business that expects to burn through LCD panels, with this machine the screen can be changed in mere minutes because you can access the panel and all the cabling directly from the top of the machine. Brilliant. All resin printers should do this. Limiting maintenance downtime is a huge plus for anyone planning to use this in a production print farm. This should be an obvious approach for any serious resin printer manufacturer. So maybe it's just that this printer is more for the prosumer than consumer. Do you think that's it? Keep watching, but let me know in the comments. But this is where things get a bit odd, and well, I'd love to say none of this is bad, but some of it is nonsensical and suggests that Phrozen have implemented several features without a full understanding of why people would want them. Some of it is just weak design, meaning it's not what we've come to expect from a company like Phrozen, and again, certainly not of any printer at this price point. So this is the first Phrozen printer to come with a carbon filter. These don't do a ton, but they do a little to keep the bad fumes to more of a minimum. At least it would if there wasn't a huge gap around the whole of the lid, but I'll talk more about that in a moment. What's more inconvenient about this filter is that unlike other brands who've implemented these years ago, other than being USB powered, it's pretty much its own device here. You need to reach under the build plate, which is often dripping with resin, to press the power button to turn it on and off, rather than this just coming on and off when a print starts or ends. Sure, you're right, you're probably thinking that operation is just a minor irritation, but with the gap around the lid, this is possibly the most useless implementation of a potentially useful feature. And speaking of poorly fully implemented stuff, features like the camera and light installation just come across a bit cheap. And it's an approach we don't generally expect from Phrozen. The presentation of this printer in its box is better than the presentation of the internals of the printer. Like, the camera just magnetizes to the side, wedged in between the light bar and the carbon filter. And whilst this magnetized webcam does offer a greater level of positional flexibility in terms of placement, all of these bits crammed in one corner looks thrown in as an afterthought rather than being intelligently placed by Phrozen. Now, you're probably thinking this is just petty, but here's the kicker. No matter where you put this camera, you get glare from the light across the camera lens during a print, because the light bar should have been positioned behind the lens, not in front of it. That's cameras 101. And you can't move the camera further forward without worrying about the build plate hitting it during a print. So, okay, let's move on to something that everyone wants in every printer of this generation: a heater. Now, this works because it gets hot, but it pumps hot air up, not at the resin. And if the last generation of printers generated a lot of discourse about the benefits of increased screen resolution, or lack thereof, this generation will certainly give us a lot to say about the approach to resin heating. In short, the best way to heat resin is with a heated vat, like in the Apex Maker X1 or the Hagear's Ultracraft Reflex, or a heat band around the vat as a DIY option. The next is controlled heat from below the screen, like the GK2, and the next is a chamber heater. But this printer goes into a whole new category of chamber heaters, one that pushes the heat up and into the top of the case, which is the last place you want the heat to be. We all know hot air rises over cold air, so all the hot air will be at the top of the chamber, with the last thing being heated in this whole setup being the resin in the vat, specifically the resin at the bottom of the vat where it's going to cure the next layer. Instead, this heat will more likely soften the printed model, which for softer, more flexible resins can cause pulling and stretches and potentially even failures during a print. Or at least it would if the heater stayed on during a print. Yeah, that's right. Just like the Nova 3D Whale 14K, Ultra 14K, Super Ultra Mega 14K, or whatever it was called. All this does is preheat the chamber before the print starts. Then it shuts off. After this, Phrozen is reliant on the internal components and the exothermic reaction of resin curing to keep the resin warm. And it will do this to a point, but this is in no way a controlled manner of heating. It's Phrozen's engineers hoping for the best. Now, am I wrong that most of you watching print in your garages, lofts, basements, and sheds? I'm sure the testing of this worked fine in an environment that's consistently room temperature, but where these are actually used by people, it's sub 10 or even 5 degrees Celsius. And I don't just mean in the UK, I mean globally. At some point, the ambient air temperature will cool the internal components faster than they can heat the resin, and Phrozen has given us no indication of what that limit is. And again, considering the flip-top lid, heat will easily escape through the gaps between the chassis and the lid. Yeah, there's a small seal around the top edge, but it's only a couple of centimeters down the side. And the bit I find baffling, do you remember the removable plate we talked about earlier where you could connect an extractor hose? Yeah, this is right above the heater, so if you do have extraction and you want heat, the hot air is the first to get sucked out. Phrozen have said their engineers tested this and pumping hot air upwards was the best way, and I'll let smarter people than me test the efficiency of this method of heating versus other machines. Until then, I'll rely on common sense based high school GCSE physics to infer that whilst this may be better than nothing, it's only a little better than nothing, and it's far from the best way. It genuinely seems like a weaker implementation than I expect other brands to deliver. This feels like it's heater to tick off the buzzword of heater rather than the best way of solving the heating problem. So I'll say this once, and this is to all resin printer makers, not just Phrozen: heated vat. Yours sincerely, the 3D printing community. So, back to the camera quickly and the feature we all want on our 3D printers: remote monitoring and time lapses. Now, I must hand it to Phrozen in this regard. Their phone app is clean, tidy and handy. You get good notifications of printer related events, though there's no reason for it having to update me every minute after a print is complete until I open the app. But in this app, you can remotely view your printer. Sort of. This isn't live video, but on request it takes a snapshot, and when it takes a snapshot, the light comes on, snaps the pic, and the light turns off. But with the light, this has a menu setting which is on or off. You can turn it on when the printer's idle and leave it on for about 10 minutes before it automatically switches itself off. But even when you turn it on, when a print starts, it will turn off. Again, Phrozen has said they do this because the LED gives off a blue light which could affect the resin. I guess that means it could cure it. So the idea is the light should only come on when the unit takes a snapshot in time-lapse mode and then goes off. But as of right now, the timing is completely off. So some shots are with the light on and some are with the light off. You end up with an unwatchable strobe effect like you're at a 90s rave. In order for me to get a smooth time-lapse, I had to upgrade the firmware, which by the way is not over the air and directly via the printer's UI thanks to its web connection like other Wi-Fi enabled machines. But I then had to disassemble the printer slightly, which was only 6 screws, so that was helpful. Then disconnect the internal light. I then just attached an Amran MC light in order to get this to look approximately like it should when the feature works. But just to advise, this print took 27 hours with the light on the whole time with no visible effect on the resin. Nor did it have any effect when I left the light on for 4 days, having forgotten about it. So I've no idea what Phrozen's engineers are even on about in saying that being on all the time could cause issues, because if it could, use a different light. Now, when talking about the quality of these time lapses a bit further, for anyone who's watched my other videos where I accidentally checked on a printer overnight whilst in my birthday suit, you don't need to worry about that here, because the resulting time lapse is a rather depressingly low quality of 640 by 480 video. It has a hard enough time rendering the print clearly, never mind anything that it catches in the background. But again, because of the light timing issue, this currently still looks like rave footage. Now, Phrozen say they are working on this, but I can't help but remember the mighty 8K camera that took months just to get a firmware update to make this work at all, and to take some very dark screen captures, and then when it finally did work, it stopped working again immediately when the 12K screen upgrade came out. Now, I'm basing that on how Phrozen have been in the past, so they have an opportunity here to show that they've improved in terms of resolving firmware issues in a timely manner. As for the UI overall, well, at least this is clean and intuitive. Give it a couple of goes through and it's one of the easiest to navigate. I can't say it's anything amazing, but this is kind of the bar that all brands should adhere to. However, when printing, the printer goes into a nice screensaver mode when left idle for a couple of minutes, and then after more time this display turns off completely until you tap it again. But this obviously hides a lot of useful information you'd want to see at a glance during prints, like progress. You can set the internal timeout for this to be as long as 3 minutes, but there's currently no way to turn it off entirely. And speaking of the info available during a print, current temperature is not one of them. In fact, the only way to see current temperature that the machine reads is in the menus, and again, considering this is one of the main features of this new generation and we'd want to see what it is at all times, especially when we're so reliant on internal components keeping that temperature, it's just never there. And finally, before print quality, on the issue detection features. The foreign object detection is way too oversensitive, and there's no option to just ignore this warning and continue printing anyway. If it detects a foreign object, you must resolve this. You cannot print. For the last 5 of my prints before I wrote this review, I've had to do a vat clean despite fishing around in the vat looking for even a speck of cured resin. I can't see a thing, there's no perceived indents in the release film, but the printer refuses to let me continue because it feels something's there. Even emptying the vat, filtering the resin and re-leveling the plate hasn't helped. Sometimes it'll work, only after I perform a vat clean before each print, wasting resin. I do love these printers having all of these modern detection features, but just like early warning systems in cars, it's taking the brand's time to get this right and stop giving false warnings. And in this case, because I can't just ignore it and absorb those potential specks of resin into the base layers of my next print, it's actually making it harder for me to print anything because I have to deal with this crap every time. And for all the stuff that it does detect, the thing it doesn't detect is resin level, a feature which has all but become a staple in printers with pressure detection. Forgive me for just assuming this printer would do it, but after starting one of these large Loot Studios prints, I was shocked to find that the resin had run out before we were even halfway through the print. Now then, on print quality. Well, I said earlier, this is no better than a 12K printer. I used Phrozen's new hyperfine resin, which I must admit I do like as a high detail resin. Yeah, it's still a bit on the more brittle side, but nowhere near as much as Aqua 8K. And because the AVC of this printer is down to 24 microns, I lowered the lift height to 20 microns as a close approximation. Of course, my prints took much longer with this increased number of layers, but even without anti-aliasing, these Loot Studios parts look buttery smooth. Speaking of, if you haven't checked out Loot Studios, there's a link in the description. I'm not even going to do the sales pitch, just click it, see how much you get for how little money you spend, and I expect more of you than not will sign up, assuming you aren't already, because I also expect most of you are. And yes, I earn a commission on your sign up, that's how I can afford to eat. Okay. Conclusion time. So yes, there's a lot of negative in here in my opinion, but on the absolute plus side, they do give us a decent SanDisk USB drive that you don't really need because you can just use Wi-Fi now. Like I said, this printer has a lot of great features, but in recent Phrozen fashion, these elements are just not directly connected or integrated as well as they could be, or even have been previously or by other brands. And I'm not saying this printer's bad. Like, don't misinterpret this as a negative review of the printer. The printer's fine. I'm just finding it hard to justify these extra features that are kind of mashed in there and don't fully reach their own potential versus a printer from Phrozen like the Mega 12K. I don't get why you would buy this over the 12K. If you do and you see a benefit in these features, then let me know. But otherwise, this is quite literally the same. It prints the same quality. It's pretty much kind of the same thing. I'm scratching my head at this one, guys. That's it. If you want to buy it, fine. But anyway, let's continue. Phrozen were once known as the innovators in this industry. Whilst Elegoo and Anycubic battled it out on their race to the bottom, well, until the 12K generation where Anycubic continued to sink lower, only for Elegoo to trump them, Phrozen always stood strong, doing their own thing by delivering much of the same, but in better, more robust ways. It was easy to pick them out from the crowd because of their reliability. And I was excited for this printer. I had an idea of its price point long before I knew any of the specs. I know people are willing to spend this much money for a printer with features deserving of it. But I just can't help but look at this mismatch of half-delivered messy ideas that's thrown together in a sexy box and wonder, how is this better? How is this better than printers we had in the last generation that offer many more user conveniences at a lower price? I'd love to tell you this is the one you should get if you want the reliable machine. I would love to sell this one to you. I'd make a massive commission on the price of this. That's how I earn my money, commissions on sales. I'm not paid to do these videos. So of course, it's in my best interest to say, buy this one, it's great. But anyway, as I was saying, I'd love to tell you this is the one you should get if you want the reliable machine, but in the 4 weeks I've had this, that is the one thing I can't test. And we won't know how reliable this truly is until we know how reliable it was, which is in about 2 years from now. So I guess if you know and trust Phrozen and want to support them, knowing how great they have been with us in the past, then buy this one. I do want to add that I've spoken to Phrozen about this review before it came to you, and it's not something I do typically with other brands, but it's because I've got a special respect for Phrozen. I wanted to see if there was anything we could do here to work on, any immediately pending updates, or if I'd missed a trick somewhere. And I would like to thank Phrozen for their attitude towards, well, what was a difficult conversation for both of us. I'd like to thank them for their understanding, professionalism, candor, and acknowledgement of the things I've covered here. So whilst I cannot say that Phrozen have impressed me this time around, they, beyond many of their competitors, still have my respect. I'd like to say thanks for watching and thanks to our members who are on screen now. This is not the last you will see of this printer on my channel. I will be coming back to it again in comparison videos, and that'll be against other machines, so please subscribe so that you don't miss out. And remember, I'm not saying this is an awful machine and nobody should buy one. I never want to say that about anything. If this is what you want, please order one. I have affiliate links in the video description. I'd love you to use them. But my goal is for you to get a printer that you love. And if you disagree with anything I've said, that's okay too. Please pop it down in the comments. I do read every single one and reply to as many as I can. But for now, until next time, I used to be an adventurer like you until I took an arrow to the knee. Fohammer out.